Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. Did you know 97% of our viewers aren't subscribed? By subscribing, you'll be the first to see every new story we release. No more searching. Plus, it really supports the channel and allows us to keep creating the content you enjoy. If you value these stories, take a moment and subscribe below. Thanks. Okay, now to today's story. You know, sometimes I sit here, in this quiet house now, and I think back. Back to when things, well, when they were different. Not necessarily good, mind you, but different. And what gets me, what really sticks in my craw, is how invisible I was. How I let myself become invisible. It's like, one day you're there, a person with thoughts and feelings and all that jazz, and the next, poof, you're just the wallpaper, the background noise, the one who makes the coffee and does the laundry. And nobody even notices when you stop making the good coffee because you just don't see the point anymore. Leonard, my husband, well, he was always a busy man. Important meetings, phone calls that couldn't wait, emails that just had to be answered right then and there. You know the type, always rushing, always with his mind somewhere else, not really here, with me. Even when he was sitting right across the table, eating his dinner, his eyes would be glued to that little screen in his hand. Work, he'd say. It's important, Martha. Important. And I'd just nod, stirring my own food, the silence between us, thick enough to spread on toast. Our days, they kind of just flowed. Or maybe they just stagnated. He'd get up early, grab a quick cup of coffee, the regular kind he never noticed when I stopped making the fancy stuff, and he'd be out the door. Sometimes I wouldn't even hear him leave. Then I'd get up, do the usual things, clean up, maybe watch a bit of TV. Sometimes I'd try to read a book, but my mind would always wander. Wondering what he was doing, who he was talking to. Not in a jealous way, not at first anyway. More like just wondering if he ever thought about me at all. Evenings were pretty much the same. He'd come home, usually late, looking tired. He'd say hi, maybe give me a quick peck on the cheek. Felt more like a formality than anything else. And then he'd settle in front of the TV or go back to his computer. Dinner was quiet. Small talk was rare. It was like we were living in two separate little bubbles, bumping into each other now and then, but never really connecting. I remember one time, I got a new dress. It was a nice one, a little out of my usual style. I was feeling good about myself that day, you know? I even put on some makeup, something I hadn't bothered with in a while. He came home, looked right at me and said, "Did you change the curtains, Martha? They look nice." Curtains. He thought I was the curtains. That's how much he noticed. Me. That's how invisible I'd become. And it wasn't like I didn't try, you know? In the beginning, I did. I'd ask him about his day, try to tell him about mine. But he'd usually cut me off, or his eyes would glaze over, and I'd just stop. What was the point? It was like talking to a wall. A very busy, important wall, but a wall nonetheless. The little things started to get to me. The way he'd leave his socks on the floor even though the laundry basket was right there. The way he'd never remember my birthday. Not really. He'd always get me some generic gift last minute, like he'd just grabbed it from the gas station on the way home. One year, it was a car air freshener. A car air freshener? We barely even went anywhere in the car, and my voice, it just kinda faded away. I stopped offering my opinion, stopped suggesting things. What was the use? He never listened anyway. It was like I was slowly disappearing, bit by bit, until there was hardly anything left of the person I used to be. The person who had dreams and laughed out loud and had things to say. She was still in there, somewhere, buried under years of being unseen and unheard. But she was getting quieter and quieter. Sometimes, when I was alone in the house, I'd catch my reflection in the mirror, and I wouldn't even recognize the woman staring back at me. Tired eyes, lines around my mouth that weren't just from smiling, and this sadness that seemed to have settled in, deep down. It was like I was a ghost in my own life. There were times, late at night, when I'd lie in bed next to him, his breathing heavy and even, and I'd just stare at the ceiling, and this feeling would bubble up inside me. Not exactly anger, not yet, More like a deep ache, a hollow feeling, like something was missing, like a part of me had been taken away, slowly, without me even realizing it. One Thursday, it was just a regular Thursday, nothing special about it at all. I was looking for some old tax papers in Leonard's office. He kept everything locked away in this old filing cabinet. Usually, I wouldn't even bother going in there. It was his space, his stuff. But I needed to find something. I can't even remember what it was now. Anyway, the cabinet wasn't locked, which was odd. Leonard was usually so careful about things like that. And that's when I saw it. Just a little slip of paper, tucked away in a folder. It wasn't the tax papers I was looking for, but it sure did grab my attention. It was a receipt. A receipt for a hotel. A fancy hotel, downtown. And it wasn't just for one night, it was for a whole weekend. A weekend Leonard had told me he was away on a business trip. My heart did this little flutter thing, like a trapped bird. I picked up the receipt, my hand, shaking a little. The name on the receipt wasn't mine. It was a woman's name, a name I didn't recognize. And suddenly, all those little things, the late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls, the way he'd been acting, distant, it all started to click into place. Like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was trying to solve. That's when the ache started to turn into something else. Something harder, something sharper, something that felt a lot like, well, you'll find out soon enough. Let's just say that little piece of paper changed everything. It woke up that woman in the mirror, the one with the dreams and the voice, and she was not happy. Not happy at all. Okay, so after I saw that receipt, my first thought was, nah, there's gotta be a mistake. Maybe it was for a business thing and the name was just someone he was meeting with. Yeah, that's it. Leonard he wouldn't do that. Not to me. We'd been married for 20 years, for crying out loud. 20 years. That's a long time to just throw away, right? But then, you know how your mind starts playing tricks on you? All those little things I'd brushed aside, the times he'd come home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, the way he'd suddenly gotten all secretive with his phone, they all came flooding back, like a dam had burst in my head. And each little memory was another piece of that puzzle clicking into place, making the picture clearer and clearer. And the picture wasn't pretty, not at all. I put the receipt back in the folder, trying to act normal, like I hadn't seen anything. I even managed to find the tax papers I was supposedly looking for. But inside, my head was spinning. It was like everything I thought I knew about Leonard, about our life together, was suddenly up in the air, swirling around like dust in a sunbeam. And I didn't know where it was all going to land. That night, when Leonard came home, I watched him. Really watched him. The way he moved, the way he talked, the way he didn't really look at me. It was like I was seeing him for the first time, seeing past the Leonard I thought I knew, the one I'd built up in my head over all those years. And what I saw, it wasn't good. He seemed, I don't know, lighter. Happier, maybe? And that stung. It really did. He asked me how my day was, just a quick, polite question, not really waiting for an answer. Fine, I said, my voice sounding flat even to my own ears. Just the usual. And he just nodded, already turning his attention to the TV. It was like I hadn't even spoken, like I was still just the wallpaper. I went into the kitchen to start making dinner, my hands moving on autopilot. But my mind was racing. Who was this woman? What did she mean to him? Had this been going on for a long time? The questions just kept coming, one after the other, like waves crashing on a shore. And with each question, that hard, sharp feeling inside me grew stronger. I thought about confronting him, just coming right out and asking him about the receipt. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the fear of what he might say. Maybe it was the feeling that I needed to know more, to have all the pieces of the puzzle before I laid them out on the table. Or maybe a little part of me wanted to see how far this went, wanted to see just how much he was willing to lie. So I played along. I acted like everything was normal. I made his favorite dinner. I sat next to him on the couch while he watched TV. I even laughed at one of his stupid jokes, but inside I was a million miles away. I was thinking, planning. That little slip of paper had done something to me. It had lit a fire inside me, a fire that had been smoldering for years, hidden under all that quiet resignation. And now it was burning, and it was burning hot. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. I noticed things I'd never noticed before. The way he'd clutch his phone when I came into the room. The little smiles he'd have to himself sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd suddenly started working late a lot more often. Each little thing was like another confirmation, another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Or maybe it was the coffin of the man I thought I knew. I even started doing a little digging of my own. Nothing too obvious, mind you. Just little things. Leaving his laptop open when he went to the bathroom just to see if anything popped up. Checking the caller ID on the phone when it rang. It felt sneaky, I know. It wasn't like me, but I felt like I had to. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And the truth, as it turned out, was even worse than I imagined. It wasn't just a weekend thing. It had been going on for months, maybe even longer. There were emails, not many, but enough. Sweet little nothings that made my stomach churn. There were phone numbers I didn't recognize, called late at night. And then one day, I found a picture. On his phone, hidden in a folder, a picture of him and this woman, smiling, holding hands. Looking happy, happier than I'd seen him in years. That was it. That was the moment something inside me just snapped. All the hurt, all the resentment, all those years of feeling invisible. It all just boiled over. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just felt this cold, hard anger settle in my chest. And in that moment, I knew. I knew what I had to do. He had made me feel like I didn't matter, like I was nothing. Well, I was going to show him just how wrong he was. He thought he could just walk all over me, treat me like I was invisible, and get away with it. He had another thing coming. Martha, the quiet, unseen wife, was about to make her presence felt, and he wasn't going to like it one bit. My plan started to take shape in my mind, slow at first, then faster and faster, like a snowball rolling, downhill. And the more I thought about it, the more a little smile started to creep onto my face. It wasn't a happy smile, not really. It was more of a knowing smile. A smile that said, "You messed with the wrong woman." And Leonard was about to find that out the hard way. Okay, so the anger was there, burning steady. But just being mad wasn't going to fix anything. I needed a plan, a good one, something that would really make Leonard see what he'd done, make him feel it, and not just for a little while. I wanted it to stick. I started thinking about all the things Leonard cared about. His job, for sure. He was always going on about how important it was, how much he'd worked to get where he was, and his reputation. Oh, he was real big on that. Always worried about what people thought. And then there was his money. He loved his money, hoarded it like a squirrel with nuts. So, I figured, if I wanted to really get to him, I had to go after those things. Hit him where it hurt the most. But how? I wasn't exactly a master criminal. I'd spent most of my life making sure the house was clean and dinner was on the table. Not exactly skills that translate well to revenge. But then I started thinking about all the things I did know, all the little details about Leonard's life that he probably thought I never paid attention to. The passwords he used for his accounts, mostly easy stuff, names of old pets, his mother's birthday, the way he always left his briefcase unlocked when he was at home, the little comments he'd make about things at work, things he probably shouldn't have been saying out loud. It was like all those years of being invisible had actually been an advantage. I'd been there, in the background, watching and listening, and I'd soaked up a lot more than he ever realized. I started small. I knew he had a separate email account for some of his business ventures, as he called them. I'd overheard him talking about it on the phone once, being real careful not to let me hear too much. But I'd caught the name, and I knew one of his old passwords. Just a lucky guess, really. But it worked. I logged in, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt weird, like I was doing something really bad. But then I remembered that picture on his phone, and that feeling went away real quick. What he was doing was way worse. The emails in that account, well, they painted a pretty clear picture. It wasn't just this one woman. There had been others. Over the years, all these little flings hidden away. And there was also some stuff about his business ventures that didn't sound quite right. Shady deals, things he was trying to keep secret from. Well, from everyone, I guess. Including the tax man, probably. I copied everything, every email, every attachment. I made sure I had it all saved in a safe place. This was my ammunition, my proof. Next, I started looking into his finances. I knew he had investments, things he never talked to me about. But I knew where he kept the paperwork, hidden in a locked box in the back of his closet. But I also knew the combination. Another one of those easy passwords. Inside the box, there were all sorts of documents, bank statements, investment reports, things that looked important but made my head spin a little. I took pictures of everything, every page. I didn't really understand all of it, but I knew it was important. I could feel it. There were numbers. There, big numbers. And something about the way they were arranged, it just didn't look right. I also remembered something he'd said once, about a secret offshore account. He'd been bragging to one of his friends on the phone, thinking I wasn't listening. He'd mentioned the name of the bank. It was in some place I'd never even heard of. I wrote it down, just in case. It was like I was becoming a detective. A sneaky, underhanded detective. But I didn't care. I felt like I was finally taking control of something. After all those years of feeling helpless, I was finally doing something. I even started paying attention to his phone calls. He'd usually go out to the patio to talk when it was someone important, but sometimes I could still hear bits and pieces. Enough to get an idea of what was going on. And it wasn't just the woman. There were problems at work too. Big problems, it sounded like. The more I found out, the more my plan started to solidify. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. He had lied to me, betrayed me, made me feel like I was nothing. He deserved to face the consequences. I started making preparations. I opened a new bank account, one he didn't know about. I started putting away a little bit of money here and there, money I'd managed to squirrel away over the years. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I also started talking to a lawyer, just for some advice at first. I told her a little bit about my situation, not everything, but enough to get an idea of my options. She told me about divorce, about what I might be entitled to. It was all a bit overwhelming, but it was good to know. I knew I had to be careful. Leonard was smart in his own way. If he suspected anything, he'd probably try to hide things, cover his tracks. So I had to act like everything was still normal. I had to keep up the charade. It wasn't easy. There were times when I just wanted to scream, to tell him everything I knew. But I held back. I knew my plan needed time. It needed to be perfect. I started thinking about the timing. When would be the best time to strike? I considered doing it right away, confronting him with the evidence. But then I thought, no, I wanted to make it count. I wanted to make sure he really felt the impact. He had a big conference coming up, a really important one for his job. He'd been talking about it for months. It was supposed to be his big chance to impress some important people. That's when I decided. That was going to be my moment. I imagined his face when it all came out. The shock, the disbelief, the anger. It gave me a little thrill, I won't lie. After all those years of seeing me as nothing, he was finally going to see me, really see me, and he wasn't going to like what he saw. The days leading up to the conference, I was a whirlwind of quiet activity. I gathered all my evidence, organized it, made copies. I talked to the lawyer again, finalized some things. I even bought myself a new outfit, something that made me feel strong, confident. The old, invisible Martha was gone, and a new Martha was taking her place. one who wasn't afraid to fight back, one who was ready for anything. And Leonard, he had no idea what was coming. He just went about his business, oblivious as ever. And that, in a way, made it even sweeter. He was walking right into my trap, and he didn't even see it. The day of Leonard's big conference finally arrived. He was all dressed up in his fancy suit, looking important and self-satisfied. He gave me a quick kiss on the forehead as he headed out the door, already talking on his phone about some deal that just couldn't wait. I just smiled and waved, feeling a strange mix of nerves and excitement bubbling inside me. This was it. The day I'd been planning for. As soon as he was gone, I got to work. I had a list, carefully written out, of everything I needed to do. First, I called the hotel where the conference was being held. I'd found the number in one of Leonard's emails. I asked to speak to the manager, and I told him I had some important information regarding one of their guests, a Mr. Leonard Thompson. I didn't go into details, just said it was a matter of professional conduct. He sounded a little confused but agreed to meet with me. Next, I printed out all the emails I'd found, the pictures, the financial documents. I made sure everything was clearly labeled and organized. This was my proof, and I wanted it to be undeniable. Then, I did something I'd been thinking about for a while. I wrote a letter. It wasn't a long letter, just a few pages. In it, I laid out everything. Leonard's lies, his betrayals, the way he'd made me feel. I didn't hold back. I wrote about the other woman, about the shady business, deals, about everything I'd discovered. It felt good to finally put it all down on paper, to give voice to all those years of silence. I made a copy of the letter for myself, and then I put the original in a sealed envelope. On the front, I wrote the name of Leonard's boss. I'd found his contact information online. After that, I took a deep breath and made another phone call. This one was to a reporter at the local newspaper. I'd done a little research and found someone who specialized in investigative journalism. I told him I had a story he might be interested in, something about a prominent local businessman who wasn't quite as upstanding as he seemed. He sounded intrigued and agreed to meet with me later that day. By the time I was done with all the phone calls and printing, it was almost lunchtime. I made myself a sandwich, but I could barely eat. My stomach was all tied up in knots. But I knew I had to keep going. In the afternoon, I drove down to the hotel. I met with the manager, a serious-looking man in a dark suit. I handed him a copy of the letter I'd written for Leonard's boss, along with some of the key emails and financial documents. I explained that I was Leonard's wife and that I had some concerns about his professional conduct. I didn't go into the details of the other woman, just focused on the business stuff. The manager looked shocked. He thanked me for bringing it to his attention and promised to look into it. From the hotel, I went straight to the newspaper office. The reporter I'd spoken to was waiting for me. I laid out my story, showed him all the evidence I had collected. He listened intently, his eyes widening as he looked through the documents. He asked me a lot of questions, and I answered them as honestly as I could. By the time I left, he seemed convinced that I had a real story. He said he would start looking into it right away. The rest of the day was a blur. I went home, cleaned. The house, I don't know why, it just felt like something I needed to do. And then I waited. Leonard called a couple of times, sounding busy and important. He had no idea what was waiting for him. That evening, I got a call from Leonard's boss. He sounded not happy. He said he'd received my letter and that he was taking the allegations very seriously. He told me that Leonard had been suspended, effective immediately, pending an investigation. I just said thank you and hung up the phone. It was done. The first part of my plan was complete. Leonard's career, the thing he valued so much, was now hanging by a thread. The next morning, the newspaper story broke. There it was, on the front page, with a picture of Leonard looking very serious. The headline was something about a local businessman facing accusations of fraud and misconduct. They didn't name him directly, but anyone who knew Leonard would recognize the details. I sat in my living room, drinking my coffee, and read the article. It felt surreal, like I was reading about someone else's life. But it was real. It was happening. A few hours later, Leonard came home. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His face was pale, his eyes were wide with panic. He saw me sitting there, calm as you please, and he just stared. "Martha," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "What? What have you done?" I just looked at him, a small, quiet smile on my face. "I finally made myself visible, Leonard," I said. "Did you miss me?" He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just stood there, looking lost and confused. And then, the anger started to creep into his eyes. "You did this," he said, his voice rising. "You ruined everything." "Did I, Leonard?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "Or did you do that yourself?" And that's when I told him. I told him I knew about the other woman, about all the other women. I told him I knew about his shady deals, about the offshore account. I told him everything. He tried to deny it, of course. He tried to lie, to twist things around. But I had the proof. I showed him the emails, the pictures, the financial documents. He couldn't deny it anymore. The fight that followed was, well, it wasn't pretty. There were a lot of raised voices, a lot of accusations, but I stood my ground. I wasn't the same woman he'd ignored for all those years. I had found my voice, and I wasn't afraid to use it. By the end of it, he was packing his bags. He didn't have much to say. He just looked defeated. As he walked out the door, he turned back one last time. "You'll regret this, Martha," he said. I just smiled. "No, Leonard," I said. "I think you're the one who's going to regret this." And as the door closed behind him, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. It was finally over. The life I had known was gone. But maybe something better was waiting for me on the other side. After Leonard left, the house felt different. Quiet, for sure, but also lighter, like a weight had been lifted. For a few days, I mostly just wandered around, getting used to the silence. It was strange not having him there, not hearing his phone calls or the TV blaring, but it wasn't a bad strange, more like a peaceful strange. The divorce was messy, as expected. Leonard tried to fight me on everything, tried to hide his money, tried to make it look like I was the one who'd done something wrong. But I had my lawyer, and I had my proof. In the end, I didn't get everything I wanted, but I got enough to start over. The newspaper story caused a real stir in town. People were talking. Leonard's reputation took a nosedive. He lost his job, and from what I heard, he was having a hard time finding a new one. The other woman? Well, she disappeared pretty quickly once things started to fall apart. Guess she wasn't in it for the long haul. As for me, I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with old friends. I took a pottery class. I even started volunteering at the local animal shelter. It felt good to be doing things for myself, to be around people who actually saw me. One day I was at the shelter, cleaning out a dog kennel, when I ran into an old acquaintance, a man named Arthur. We'd known each other years ago before I got married. He'd always been a nice man, kind and funny. We started talking, and one thing led to another, and we ended up going out for coffee. Arthur was different from Leonard. He listened when I talked. He asked me about my day, and he actually seemed interested in the answer. He made me laugh. He made me feel seen. We started spending more time together, and before I knew it, I was happy. Truly happy. For the first time in a long time. It wasn't a dramatic whirlwind romance. It was quiet and comfortable and real. Sometimes I think back to those years with Leonard. And I don't feel anger anymore. Maybe a little sadness for the time I wasted. But mostly I feel proud. Proud of myself for finding the strength to stand up for myself, to take control of my own life. Revenge? Well, I guess in a way, that's what I got. But it wasn't really about revenge. It was about justice, about not letting someone else define my worth, about finding my own voice again. And you know what? I learned something important through all of this, that even when you feel like you're invisible, you still have power. You just have to find it. And sometimes it takes something drastic to make you realize it's there. So, what lengths will you go to when your world is shattered? That's the question, isn't it? For me, it wasn't about burning everything to the ground. It was about rebuilding, about creating something new and better out of the ashes. And you know what? This new life, it fits me a whole lot better.